When has a gut feeling saved your life? Story 1. I was like 8 or 9 when my parents took me and my younger brother to stay the night at my paternal grandparents' house because they were in the middle of divorcing. They lived in a farmhouse that's connected to a barn with machinery, gasoline tanks, and hay on the ground floor and furnished rooms on the floor above that. And the room we were supposed to stay in was in that barn. As soon as we went into the guest room, I was overwhelmed by panic and felt really dizzy. I turned around and just said that we will not sleep in that room, and we spent the night on the couch in the living room instead. Later that night, a gas leak in the barn ignited and almost the entire barn, including the guest room on its top floor, exploded. Maybe I had that weird feeling because the gas had leaked into the room already, but no one else felt anything, and I'm sure I would be dead if I had noticed it. Story 2. I was at a pub party being held for my boyfriend's father, but I had a headache that wasn't going away. I had been drinking, but I wasn't drunk. I was just feeling like crap, so I made my excuses and left to walk home alone as I didn't want to ruin his night with his dad. It was a 10-minute walk, if that, from the pub to our house, and it wasn't properly dark yet. I walked down the street and passed a man sitting on a wall drinking a beer. A minute after I passed, I heard the bottle smash and then footsteps a little while back. Nothing unusual. It was a main road, and there was another pub further along, but something in my gut was screaming something was wrong. So I hurriedly walked to the pub and stopped outside to ask the smokers for a light and a chat as I smoked. I watched him pass by me and then stare at me from across the street for an uncomfortable amount of time. With my gut screaming at me, I asked the bouncer working the doors if he could order me a taxi. A few weeks later, while in the town center, I saw a mugshot of the same dude, wanted for R. Story 3. A similar thing happened to me, but I was in middle school. Both of my parents were military, and so summer meant some sort of camp or program. Well, I got into some local college program where young kids study advanced subjects. The day was over before my mom's workday, so I would take the light rail to the library or sometimes to the local CC. Anyway, it was my first time ever really being on my own in a city or in public in general. My parents got me my first cell phone because of all this. It didn't make me scared, but prepared. I sort of did the same thing every day. I would get off my stop, go get a burger, and then go to the one place or the other. A couple of times I noticed a man would walk behind me. He would also be at the local quick market by the burger place. He never tried to talk to me or do anything like that. But after the 4th time I noticed, I called my mom and she told me people are just going about their day on a schedule like I am. So it could just be a coincidence. Well, one day I decided to eat inside the burger place instead of take it to go. I saw him walking outside and straight towards the way I normally go. But before he got out of the parking lot, he started looking around like he was looking for someone or something. I went to the restroom, called my mom, and told her to go get me. I didn't go that way ever again after that. Took a new route. About a week or so later, the news spoke about a girl who had gone missing, and the video footage was from the same strip center as the burger place. Yeah, the suspect was the man who had been following me. Story 4. I was 13 or 14. The bus would take me home from school in 15 minutes, but I liked walking 1 hour home. While walking on the main road, I saw a van pulled over, some 100 feet away from me. It wasn't a family van. It was those utility boxy looking ones. The van door was open and a man was waving at me with both of his arms. Too far to hear what he was saying. Usually, I love to help people, but something told me to keep walking. So, I did. Exactly that. Kept walking. I look back 5 minutes later, this guy's walking behind me. Relaxed pace, I'm not worried, but I walk a little faster. I look back maybe 2 to 3 minutes later, and he's still walking, but closer, and waving his arms again. So I start jogging a little. Now he's jogging, then I start running as fast as I can, not stopping to look back. At one point, I turned onto the next street and couldn't see him anymore. I was so cold with fear, out of breath, waiting for the intersection light to change. The light changed, went back to walking, I was out of breath. 5 minutes later, I look back and he's still following me. So I ran the last 2 minutes to my building. I didn't want him to see where I lived. I ran into a building lobby. Looked through the glass doors, he wasn't there. I pushed the elevator button and went back to the glass door and saw him on the street far away, still walking. I've always tried to make sense of what he was going to do. This was a busy suburban area. Was he just going to stab me and run away? What did he want with me in particular? Did he just leave his van behind to get towed? So many questions. Story 5. When I was around 18, I was on a back road with some friends and a girl I didn't know who was driving really fast. Now, I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I've always enjoyed a calculated risk in the name of a good time. But on this occasion, I told her to either slow the down or let me out. I literally had to start screaming at her before she listened and slowed down. A week later, she crashed on that same stretch of road at 90 miles per hour, killing her and the 3 passengers of her car. Story 6. My boyfriend's ex's rebound did this to her. He had a fast little car. They were cruising one day. He started laughing. She asked what. He jammed on the gas and started whipping along a mountain. While this is going on, she's screaming for him to stop, clawing at the door, hysterically freaking out as the car skid along the road inches from 100+ feet drops. She told my boyfriend about it. He did what I believed to be the right thing and told her family. They dated for like 4 years, so he knew them and they knew he didn't lie. They banned her from seeing him and reinforced it. He ended up himself doing the same thing in the rain. Story 7. I don't know if this was a gut feeling or lucky coincidence, but I decided I should empty the bin on my way to uni, which added maybe 10 seconds to my journey as the skip was 10 feet from my front door. I began my walk to uni and roughly 10 seconds of walking in front of some idiot from the 3rd floor flat through a load of glass out his window, smashing all over the path. Story 8. I went to go catch the bus. I saw the bus about to pull out from the stop, and I could have made it if I ran. Something told me not to catch it and just wait for the next one. So I did exactly that. I caught the next bus half an hour later. Now, I usually sit at the back of the bus on the driver's side, so that's where I sat. A little away into the journey, traffic was slowing, and we got to the cause of it. A lorry had crashed into the bus I had missed, right into the back on the driver's side. Had I caught the bus, I wouldn't be here. Still gives me chills after 6 years. Story 9. I was staying at a friend's house out in the country. He was asleep in another room. I was dozing off with his gigantic pit bull, Izzy Bell. Izzy Bell is a sweet girl. In the middle of the night, I am awoken by sounds outside, like scrabbling. Izzy leaps up too, looks at me, then the back door, and growls. My friend at the time had a younger daughter, 4 or 5, so I immediately think of her. I grab the nearest weapon, which is a fire poker, and go to open the door as Izzy is beside me, seemingly ready for a fight. But it didn't feel right. I instead bar the door best I can and creep to a window looking out. Outside is a gigantic bear, so big it could easily rip my head off. And it has a few cubs in tow. A wash as it ambles off. I'm pretty sure that if I had charged out of that door as I originally intended, me and Izzy would not be here today. Story 10. I was taking my mom to a follow-up appointment from back surgery the month before. The freeway was closed due to a car accident and Life Flight was called to transport the people injured in the accident. The highway patrol was funneling everyone off of the freeway to the right side exit. I had the strongest feeling we needed to move to the left farthest lane. So I did. No more than a minute after I moved over, a garbage truck came barreling down the freeway and crashed into the car that was in front of us in the other lane so fast that it lifted the front end of the truck and it landed on top of the car. We were in a tiny sports car that would have crumpled like a tin can under the weight of a garbage truck and definitely would have killed my mom and me in a second. Story 11. My mom knew something was wrong with me when I was younger. The doctors didn't want to see me for another 2 weeks. My mom went into a blind rage over the phone telling them that she was taking me to get checked whether they liked it or not. We gotta go to GP. He puts a stethoscope on my back and smells my breath. Then says we need to get him into the hospital now. Turns out I have type 1 diabetes, but if I'd waited another day, I would have died. The breath part is due to the buildup of ketones in the blood, as I was in the severe stages of diabetic ketoacidosis. For everyone curious what it smelled like, it smelled like apples. Story 12. A few years ago, I was at a bar with a couple of friends. All was good, we were drinking and having fun. All of a sudden, we heard this discussion taking place just a couple of tables from us. 2 guys decided to have a shouting/threat match. I stopped everything to pay attention to them. My friends were making fun of me, saying I was gossipy. One of the guys in the discussion got up and left. Immediately after he left, I told my friends we had to go. Now, let's just go. They didn't get why I was like that, but since I'm their friend, since forever, they reluctantly agreed. We went to a different bar in a different neighborhood, but I couldn't take my mind off of those 2 guys. The next day, the news were talking about a bar fight. Apparently the guy who got up went home, grabbed a gun, and came back for a drive-by. Killed 4 people in the process. My grandpa taught me to never ignore my gut, and I couldn't be happier to have listened. Story 13. A few weeks ago, I just left my apartment complex and was heading to a friend's. I pulled out my driveway and up to the traffic light and stopped. I was in the left turn lane, light was red, it was late out, and there wasn't many people on the road. I watched as the light went yellow and then red for through traffic. One guy ran the tail end of the yellow, like usual. My turn, light goes green. I have an arrow blinking for me to turn left. I looked both ways and there was no one around, and I just didn't go. I cannot explain what happened other than something inside me just said, don't go. So I sat there staring at the green light. A couple seconds later, a car came screaming through the red light through the intersection, probably doing 100 km per hour in the lane I would have been turning into. They were going so fast, their vehicle had to bounce to it. If I had turned, my car would have been for sure destroyed, and me along with it. I sat there through the whole next light cycle and then turned, pulled over, and called my sister. It was a ghostly feeling. I'm a light jumper. I look both ways, but I am impatient. I cannot explain what stopped me from going the second that light went green, but I'm glad it did. Story 14. There was a pain in my lungs when I inhaled. I've never been stabbed. I don't know what it's like, but the pain should have been equal to it, if not worse. It had happened before years ago. Some hot water in the shower and the pain was gone. My wife, then girlfriend, insisted on going to the ER. I insisted on hot water. I feel like we should go and see a doctor, she said. I was diagnosed with pulmonary embolism. on both lungs. Doctor said 1 or 2 more hours and you would be gone. So yeah, I definitely owe my wife. Story 15. I was driving a friend home late that night when I was around 21. She lived in a pretty rural area outside of St. Louis. MO, and about a quarter mile from her house was an old abandoned farm and farmhouse. I always thought of this place as non-threatening, as she told me she and her 2 sisters would go there as kids and they found an attic full of cool things, including a trunk of vintage women's clothing and old love letters, like something out of a movie. Anyway, I'm driving her home and it's hot. Humid Missouri summer, and we have the windows open as the late night had offered some cool air. We were also singing at the top of her lungs. We pass the abandoned farm and I drop her off at her house. I wait long enough to see she makes it inside and I head back out the way I came. I'm driving along and I get to almost where the farm is, and I see 2 things in the road. My danger meter goes off as I had just driven this road and there was nothing there. I put the windows up and make sure the doors are locked. I get closer and I realize the items are 2 car batteries spaced out in the road, which was basically a 1-lane road, in a way that I would have to get out and move them to drive on the road. I immediately knew I wasn't getting out of the car, so I picked the side of the road that had the lesser ditch and I gunned it. I was driving a little SUV and I remember feeling the car run over branches and things in the little ditch, but I just gunned it and got out of there. All the way home, I felt creeped out. I just kept checking my rear view mirror. I called my friend the next morning and told her what had happened. We both agreed it was weird. Shortly after that, I moved to another state and I didn't really think much of it after that. Fast forward to 2 to 3 years later, when I was back home visiting my hometown, I randomly ran into my old friend, and she ran up to me with wide eyes and grabbed my arms. She asked me if I remembered what I told her that night. I said yes, and then she proceeded to tell me that not too long after that had happened, her family was awakened in the middle of the night to someone pounding on their sliding glass door. Her dad went to check and saw 2 naked, injured women and let them in and called 911. They had been abducted from the St. Louis city, about 40 minutes away, by 2 men and brought to the old abandoned farmhouse where the men tortured and arred them. The women somehow managed to get free and ran to the only light they could see, the light over my friend's garage. They survived, but the men were never caught. There was evidence the men had been going there for a while. My friend was convinced they had put the batteries in the road to lure me out of the car. I'm just really glad my gut told me not to. Story 16. I almost got kidnapped once. I was like 23 or so. I was walking down my street at a little after dusk. I saw a van approaching a little ahead, no lights on. I didn't really think much of it due to the time of day. The van slowed down and almost like started creeping as I was approaching this part of the sidewalk, which had a tall, solid wall fence to a community. This gave me some pause in that quick moment. For me to keep walking, I'd have to go between the wall and the van. In the little time it took me to get a couple of steps, and as the van was getting close, I noticed that the side door was slowly sliding open. The one thought in my mind was, why isn't the light turning on inside the van? When you open the door of a vehicle, the light should come on inside it, unless you deliberately switch that off. And I just ran to the median. I ran in front of the van and across the street, because if they're gonna have some use of roadkill me, have at it. But they're not getting me in one glorious piece. Immediately, the van took off like someone lit it on fire, from a slow crawl to full speed. As I looked after it to see the plates, I noticed it had no plates, and still no lights. I called the police, of course. They sent cars out and didn't find the van. I had never had anything like this happen again, and I'm just an ordinary person, so I don't suspect it was targeted. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Story 17. So, in this situation, I was both listening and not listening to my gut. I didn't listen to my gut when it said don't get into the car with this person you've just met. Well, that went to crap. He legit kidnapped me and drove me to a forest and tried to drag me out. My gut then said to calm down and be nice to him. I basically talked my way out of the situation by being kind and stroking his ego. I was able to convince him that he didn't need to do this and that I'd be his, but he needed to let me go because my friend was waiting for me and she knew I was getting a ride. This was true, and that if I didn't show up soon, maybe we couldn't be together. This guy was crazy, but it worked, and he drove me to where my friend was waiting. The entire time, I had to keep reassuring him that I'm not mad and that I'm happy he chose me. Anyway, I was safe and unharmed, except for some bruises from when I tried to fight him off earlier. He's in jail. Story 18. I was driving across the country last summer and was behind a guy and something just didn't feel right. He wasn't doing anything crazy, but the way he was driving just felt off, slowing down randomly and then speeding up a lot to compensate, wobbling around his lane, occasionally grazing the shoulder, etc. 2-lane highway, so I'm torn about passing him because A, what if he cuts me off or something while I'm doing it, and B, I don't know if I want him behind me, but also I don't want to be anywhere near him, and passing him and speeding off seems like an okay option. So, I see an exit sign and decide I'll just wait it out until then. Get gas and hopefully never see him again. Dude then swerves into the left lane and then into the grass median, across the opposing side of the highway and off into a field. Dude is still driving through this field as I'm passing. No idea what it was about, but he probably would have run into me as I passed him. Story 19. I don't know if I'd call this a gut reaction, but when I was riding motorcycles full time as a courier, I developed what I can only describe as a subconscious autopilot. There were many instances where I made an avoidance maneuver, but it took me a second to realize why I had done it. In each case, I figured out the reason and agreed with my subconscious. Though there was only one where it was not only correct, but I know saved me from death or serious injury. As I moved off from a set of a traffic light, I just caught fast movement, some distance off in the corner of my eye. There was no conscious decision at all. I performed the most extreme braking maneuver I have ever attempted. The bike stood up on its front wheel, which was then smashed out from under me by the car which ran the red light at speed. I basically made a barrel roll in place and was dumped on the ground. No serious injuries, but maybe a bruise or two. Story 21. I escaped the abduction of me and my friends thanks to my gut feeling. I was at the mall with my friends. All of us were around 12 years old. It was 8 p.m. and my mom was on her way to pick me up. We were all chilling together until each of our parents got here to get us. As we're standing outside of a store near one of the side entrances, a man comes up to us. He's about 30-ish, wearing huge glasses and carrying a clipboard. The man says, "Hey guys, do you want to watch some movie trailers and answer surveys about them? I'll pay you each $5 per trailer." Naturally, my friends are all for it. The thing is, my heart dropped as soon as I heard it. As they're all saying yes, the man nods and then points to the side entrance. It's pitch black outside. And that entrance leads to the back parking lot of the mall, which is always deserted. Then he says, "We can do it over there." My friends start to follow the man as he walks towards the glass doors, and I'm trailing behind them. Then, as we get close enough for me to kind of see what's outside, I notice a van parked right outside the entrance. The headlights are on, the car is running, the back doors seem to be open. Every part of my being screams, "No, don't go." I stop in my tracks and I loudly say, "Guys, my mom is here to pick us all up. I don't think we have time for it." The man freezes and keeps his eyes trained on the doors, and I can see his jaw clenching tightly. My friends look at me with confusion, and I try to give the most terrified expression of warning that I can. Thankfully, they get the message and say bye to the guy. The man refused to look at us and simply began to walk outside the mall.